Okay, thank you very much for joining. So today we've come to our third lecture, and what we're going to cover today, we're going to understand the CSS rules and the orders. So how we have to work with CSS. So we're going to, our indicative content, we're going to look into tags, how tags are used for CSS rather than HTML. We're going to use, we're going to see how classes, ID, inline margins, and all these characteristics, all these features are going to be used. So we already introduced what CSS is in our previous tutorial as a cascade style sheet. In our previous tutorial, the tutorial yesterday, we looked into the difference between inline, embedded, and external CSS, and we looked at the difference and how they would affect each other. So we looked at basic, adding some basic tags, some basic command to our CSS in order for us to have a response from it. And in today's session, we will now look into more details how we have to use them. So I made an example in our previous session where I created our style sheet document, and we linked it to our HTML, and we used a body. So we define our body, and we wanted to have a background column. So we now define our background column as light blue. So that was a simple example of how we have to use curly brackets to define a specific command. So we give a specific command to our code, to our CSS. So there are other CSS rules when it comes to creating a clean and readable code. So we need to follow our CSS rule set structure. So what do we mean by this? We'll now look into classes, ID, and so on, and how these are structured and what order they have to follow as well. So we have selectors. So what does selectors do? These they now target the HTML element that we want to style. So if in our external CSS, in our external file, we now define selectors, like in this example here, we are now going to give some values, some properties to specific specific tags within our HTML. Declaration block will now contain one or more declaration separated by semicolon. So these can be reusable. So it's not going to be for a specific one, but we can call this function multiple times. Then we have property. So what property does, this will now style attributes that we want to change. So we'll now use property maybe to define the color, or we're going to define any type of font size or background or so on. And then we have value, where we're now going to assign this to the property. So we're now going to specify maybe the dimension, the width, height, or other type of value, other type of attributes that we want to have. So there is a reason why this is called cascade. So by cascade, we're not just going to describe the way our browser has to resolve the conflict of styling rules. So as we all know, we can declare multiple attributes to our CSS, and we have to ensure that we have to ensure that these rules, these values will follow a specific rules, so they're not going to have a conflict between each of them. So these are not going to make our web page look not as normal as possible. So Cascade we're now going to resolve this conflict. So by following the rules and specifying using selectors, classes, ID, or so on, we're now going to ensure that the style of our page will now look neat and clean and user-friendly. So there are some factors that are really important, which we now have to apply to our style, our cascade, our CSS. So we need to follow importance, where we have to ensure that nothing is overriding. When we're declaring some values, none of them are going to override each other. Then we have to specificity, which is one of the selectors in more specific than the others. So they are going to target a specific way. They're going to target our CSS specifically. So we have a hierarchy for this specificity. So all of them are going to look into inline style, IDs, classes, and element and pseudo element. So our selectors, so this is an example of all of our selectors. So IDs, classes, element, and attributes are all under our selectors. Apologies for this presentation, which did not include, oh yeah. So with the classes, we're now going to define a group of attributes. So when we want, for instance, to have a division, not a division, when we have a section, we have a section that we wanted to have some certain font size or certain structure, we'll now use class, and we can call this class multiple times. So the concept of classes, we'll also look into it when it comes to programming with Java or any other programming language, where classes are some certain type of function that we can call in multiple times. So these are 3 examples of classes. So we have a class which is going to have a specific function to align our text in the center. So by using .center, we are telling this section of our web page to align all the text in the center of the page. We have another class called my new section style. So we have defined some values that we're going to have. So we wanted to have a specific font family. We wanted to have a specific font width and a specific font size, and also a column. And we can do so on also for my paragraph style. So even the paragraph can have its own specific font family, font size, and column. So here's an example of what we just said. So this is the code, how we're going to add the code into our Visual Studio with this relevant, with this appropriate comment that shows us that tells us what we want this class to do. And here's an example of how we're going to run the code, where we were able to link our external CSS file to our HTML document. We now added our CSS in the 3 of them. So here we have more CSS code. So when it comes to choosing a font, there are various type of colors, and here's an example of how we can find them. So some of these columns might come with some code. So for instance, when we're going to choose the Y color, we'll now see that the Y color has a specific code, which is an hashtag and the repetition of F. After classes, we have division sectors. As we know, division is a good way to structure our section within our body. So when in our body, for instance, we have a BBC website that has just different blocks of information that they want to display on the website. They will now break them down using divisions, and this is really useful. And is a division can be added into our HTML directly, or this styling can be done in our CSS, depending on how we think our website should look like. So this is an example. So where we have a nice layout with 3 divisions and so on. Here we have an example of CSS overrides. So when we say override, we don't want our CSS, our style to override each other. So this, we now have a pseudocode that will now shows us the rules and how override works. And this is the corresponding HTML. So this is the code that has to be added into our HTML in order for us to have our overriding function working properly. So in conclusion, when we're understanding the flow of overriding in CSS, is simply about understanding the rules of our sectors and the rules of specifying our cascade style sheet. Now we have advanced CSS concept, where by advanced concept, we are just simply going to use more complex sectors, more complex pseudocode and pseudo element. So we're now progressing from a basic understanding of CSS to a more advanced use of them. So we now have to use more attributes. Here we have an illustration of a pseudocode and how the use of advanced classes should look like. Then we have attributes selectors, where we're now going to provide styling option based on the presence of value into our HTML attributes. So if you already have predefined HTML values and we now want to improve them and add more features to them, we now have to use our attribute selectors in order for us to improve it. Also, we need to know what the importance of exceptions. So what are these exceptions? When it comes to generally recommend to avoid them, we now have to use override style in the specific cases. So like style guide will now require a certain element to always have the same look. So there are exceptions where this cannot be override. Then we have combining selectors, where we're now going to increase our specificity, where we're now going to combine different type of selectors. Maybe we're going to combine divisions with IDs or so on. And this is always related to how complex we want this website to look like. We also have variables. So what do we mean by variables? Variables are values that are not fixed values, they're not constant. So these values can keep on changing depending on what we want it to look like. So we now declare the CSS in a way that we know that in the future we might need to change them due to any sort of reason. Maybe we want to run updates. So maybe we want to restyle our web page. So we're now going to use CSS variable, also known as custom properties. Okay, so also we have advanced positioning. So what is positioning? So when it comes to positioning, we're now going to look at how we're going to use, how we're going to display our attributes in our web page. So for instance, with this advanced positioning, we can now change the way our navigation bar would look like. We can now change how centered, how aligned we want our boxes to be within our web page. Media query, which are the key features of a responsive design. So we all know that what makes a good website is the ability of our website to be responsive. So depending on the size of our screen, this website has to be responsive. So if we're looking at a website on a phone, or we're looking on a tablet, or on a 50 inches screen, our website must have the ability to be responsive. So by having the integration of this media query, we will now have the ability to allow this web page to be as responsive as possible. Here we have an example of the not pseudo classes, which can apply to certain style to element that do not match a list of selectors. So by using this function, we're now going to pass a value that should let the CSS know that this is not matching the list of selectors. So this function should not be applied to this certain style of CSS. So in conclusion, advanced CSS concept will now provide us a rich set of tools for us to improve our user interface. So we can now have more knowledge, more skills when it comes to designing with CSS, and will now allow us to have the flexibility to make changes in order to update or refresh the look of our web page. So this was everything from our advanced CSS lecture. Is there anything you want to know? Do you have any question?
Well, honestly, I'm just a bit puzzled by some of it. If I saw an example of how it's utilized, I might understand it a bit more.
Of the concept?
Yes,
Yeah, so let me just get something up for you.
because I understood the basics about how everything works, about adjusting it. Like I even use things like margins to move
All
the
right.
things around
Okay,
to
so
make precision.
you
And
know this.
I,
Yeah,
yes, I was looking at some of those things, especially the divs.
yeah,
The divs are just like untitled headers or footers. Like the system knows headers and footers, and but the div is like an extra box you can use. You can put the div within a div, if I'm right.
yeah, yes. That's true. I think the best way for you to master this is by practicing it. So these are
Okay.
concepts where you need to like play around with them and see the outcome of it or what you get by adding a div into the div, for example, the way you said, and see how this can be changed. So, have you seen this website, W3 School?
Yes, I have.
So if you go into CSS section, here you give you, what is wrong with this? So we have selectors here. So this gives you an example of what we've covered today, where we have pseudo classes, pseudo elements, and attribute selectors. So we can even go down to CSS div override. Borders, 3D. We have variables here. You should have division somewhere. There is not a division, which I was pretty sure there was. I know it is on HTML, the HTML example. But yeah, so by just following the examples here from this page, you can see the outcome of them. Oh, why does it keep on? So we can look at the example. So pseudo classes, this is an example of them. So what we covered in today's session, for example, pseudo classes, here we have an example of how they created this class. So this class has to be, yeah, with the comment, it tells you what it does, visited link, and they call this class with visited, and they just simply define its color. Mouse over link. So you can see mouse, click on this. So you can see what is color, hot pink. So you see, 1 second. We override, we put the mouse on top of it, and it shows you that they define it, that the color has to change to hot pink. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Selected link. So on your CSS, your external CSS, you can just try. So I hope you have Visual Studio, as you said, and you're able to create these web pages. You can just take this code, paste it on your Visual Studio, launch, run it on your live server, and see how this CSS is applied. So the pseudo classes, as you see, for example, move mouse over the link, and you can now see what the code wanted to do. You want it to change color to hot pink. Another one, select a link, selected links, which they wanted to change color to blue. So I clicked on it. When I clicked on it, it changed to blue. I don't know if you can see that. So these are simple examples of how the CSS is used. So we have also navigation bar. Sorry. For some reason it's not loading on my. So we have various examples of navigation bars. Why is it not working? Yeah, so we have a basic one.
Yeah.
So this
That's
has
the
been
use
added.
of the UL list. On
Yes,
unlisted list.
unlisted, yes. And then we have a listed one.
Yeah.
And then we have our attribute. And then we have the link. We have now created a link.
Yes, but
Well,
from what
this
I
is
can
included.
tell,
Yeah.
that's not onto like assignment 3, is it not? Like that teaching. Like,
Unlisted.
yeah, like we're not learning that until later.
Oh, how to add the navigation bar, you mean?
Yeah, like adding a HTML table. That's not until the um learning outcome 4, isn't it?
For tomorrow. Yeah. So
Yeah,
today
yeah.
is stream, so we'll cover down tomorrow. So
All
today's session was more about you see
right.
all these attributes that you can use on your CSS, on your external CSS, for you to have
Right.
what do you call your user-friendly web page.
Yeah.
So I will suggest you to play around with it. So I'm assuming you were able to create the external one. Just try to go through W3 School with these um, examples here and try to add them to your CSS file and see the outcome, what it gives you, and how your design will now look like. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, do you have any other question for me?
No, not at all.
Okay. So tomorrow, as you already know, look into table and forms,
All right.
and then we'll also have an introduction to JavaScript, which we'll cover in very detail on Friday.
On
So
Friday.
we'll have all the concept of JavaScript that you need to know.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. If this was everything, I'll just end the session and I'll see you tomorrow.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Joshua. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye.